Well, now that we're just about at the beginning of Oscar season this year, I thought it's as good a time as any to finally get around to watching one of those movies that I really wanted to see, but really haven't had the opportunity. And that movie is the very first winner of the Best Picture Oscar, the 1927 war movie, Wings. Oh, actually, when I say it's the first winner of the Best Picture Oscar, it's a bit more complicated than that. Oh, but back when the Academy first started to hold the Academy Awards, they didn't exactly know what they were doing. They were still trying to iron things out. So there were actually two Best Picture awards that year, one for Best Production and one for Best Original and Artistic Achievement. Wings was the winner for Best Production, and the winner for the Best Original and Artistic Achievement went to the film Sunrise, which was directed by F.W. Murnau. I highly recommend you see Sunrise. That's a fantastic movie. Well, but anyway, the record books tend to say that Wings is the first official Best Picture winner, so that's why I'm going to be reviewing that right now. Wings, as you might guess from the title, is a war movie. It's a World War I war movie that was released in the year 1927 and was directed by a guy named William A. Wellman, who was himself a fighter pilot in the First World War. It follows two guys who grew up in the same town. They're played by Charles Buddy Rogers. He plays a guy named Jack, who's a middle class kind of everyman sort of guy. And then there's one played by Richard Arlen, who's the son of the wealthiest family in town. And the thing is, even though these two guys are obviously the main characters and get the most screen time between each other, they're not even top billed in this movie. The person who's top billed, as you might have told when I showed you the Blu-ray case, is actually Clara Bow. Now, Clara Bow was probably one of the first major sex symbols in the motion picture industry. She was like the definitive flapper girl, the first very it girl, as they called her. And so she gets top billing here, and she gets her own subplot, but really she doesn't amount to much. And she even knew that when she was in the movie. She was really kind of resentful for her role in the movie, just because it really not that great a role for her. But I'll get to that later. Anyway, these two guys, Jack and David, are growing up in this, just average Americana town. Jack likes to work on his car, and he's actually friends with a girl played by Clara Bow. She's his childhood friend, and she's obviously in love with him, although he's oblivious to that, because that's how it always works in movies like this. And but the girl that Jack wants is this exotic girl from the city. How attractive these girls from the city are in old movies. But she is in love with the David character. The character played by Richard Arlen, and he's in love with her. Well, so both of these guys are in love with the same girl, but she's only in love with David. But she feels so bad about Jack. She pities Jack so much that she allows him to believe that she's in love with him. Back once the war breaks out, and these two guys both go into the Air Force to try to train to be fighter pilots. So that's sort of kind of a love triangle, almost a love quadrangle thing in there, where you involve the Clara Bow character, and it's a catalyst for all sorts of entertaining melodrama in between the fighter scenes. So anyway, once war breaks out and these two guys both go to the local Air Force base to train to become fighter pilots, at first they really don't like each other very much. They don't know they're both in love with the same girl, so that's not the reason they don't like it. They just don't seem to like each other at all for some reason. But eventually they become very close friends, and when they start to become friends, it's really kind of a goofy scene. Now, I don't know how the military training worked during World War I, but the way the movie portrays it is that all of the cadets in training were in the field in the middle of the army base at the same time, and all kind of like boxing each other, all with a big box, just wailing on each other like nobody's business. I'm not sure if freestyle boxing was was a legitimate training exercise back in those days, but it really came across as kind of silly to me. But anyway, the, char the character is played by Richard Arlen and Charles Rogers. You know, Jack and David. They just start to wail on each other, and then even though one gets the crap beat out of him, he refuses to go down. And that's when they start to respect each other and eventually do become very close friends. And these two actors, even though this is a silent movie, there's no dialogue. I should have pointed that out at the beginning. This is a silent movie. I mean, these actors really do have great chemistry and do work very well together in the movie. And then after that, we see scenes where they go to Europe and participate in World War I. There are a lot the war scenes in this movie are really fantastic. You know, they actually went to the point of actually strapping cameras onto real, World War I biplanes and flying them in the skies or sometimes in front of projection screens. And these are actual. In most cases, these are actual airplanes doing this. They are not using miniatures, and of course, they didn't have any digital special effects back in 1927. So these are really remarkable air footage, and that's really some of the reasons why this movie continues to be remembered today, just because of this war footage. And there's also, I think, as good as this war footage is in the air, involving the planes and stuff, I think some of the stuff that happens on the ground is just as remarkable. That's sometimes more remarkable. The scenes of trench warfare, with mortars firing and big explosions, like minefields, soldiers running across the battlefields trying to get to the next line of defense. Lots of these battle scenes actually remind me very much of the battle scenes in the D.W. Griffith movie Birth of a Nation, because it's just so large scale, so such a wide shot where it seems as if it's shown that these footages were reenacted. It seemed to go on for miles, literally. I read that the director had something like 3,500 extras to be using during the war scenes, or during one specific war sequence in this movie, and it really this is absolutely fantastic war footage. It looks completely authentic. I mean, you could honestly forgive yourself for thinking it might have actually been stock footage from newsreels at the time. It's that good. But unfortunately, the movie as a whole, with the plot and everything, is not as good as the actual war sequences in it. In particular, there's one really long, really silly, and really slow sequence that takes place in Paris while the two main characters are on leave. What happens is they had just finished participating in this major, spectacular air battle, so they're on leave in Paris, and they decide to go out and get drunk. When news comes in that their leave has been canceled, and they have to return to base to participate in the maybe final major battle of their division. So now Clara Bow shows up. Now, the thing about Clara Bow, like I mentioned, she has her own subplot here. She, after kind of being rejected by Jack, he still wants to participate in the war effort. So she becomes sort of a truck driver of sorts, driving medical equipment, driving stuff from military base to military base in Europe. So while she's while she's in Paris doing whatever she's doing in Paris, she gets the news that that Jack and David have to go back to the Air Force Base, so she tries to go out and find them. And when she finds Jack, he's in this club with this French girl, and he's just getting drunk. He starts to actually, I'm not kidding, he starts to hallucinate bubbles coming from everywhere. He seems obsessed by these bubbles that he's seeing. And Clara Bow tries to get his attention, but he completely ignores her. And then she dresses up into this, very attractive, it girl movie star dancer dress thing. And finally, it does get his attention. It's really just this. It's tough to explain, but it's just this long, slow, really kind of boring sequence that seems almost as if it's coming from a completely different movie. And it really doesn't help this one at all. The major contribution this movie makes to it is to explain why Clara Bow isn't in in the rest of the war footage, because it shows her being dejected by Jack again, and it eventually ends with her being kicked out of the military. But but any but anyway, after that happens, when the two main characters try to get back into the war stuff, the last act of this movie really does kick into high gear. I mean, the military stuff for the first two acts was really well done and very entertaining, but the last one is spectacular because what happens is the character played by David C gets shot down in the sky, and he finds himself behind enemy lines. Now Jack thinks that David died, and he basically goes on like this roaring rampage against the Germans, and just flies through the air, shooting down planes, then shooting down troops and trucks and stuff that are actually on the ground. Oh, at the same time, David is behind enemy lines trying to get back to the American base, and the way these two things kind of go back and forth is very entertaining and very well done. And the way that this part of the plot actually ends up, the way this part concludes, really is a very powerful thing, and shows just what war can do to a person. I mean, this is an early war movie, but this does not mean that this war movie is kind of like a jingoistic, glamorization of war. I mean, many times it does kind of glamorize what the pilots are capable of doing, what their jobs are, with dogfighting stuff like that. Sometimes that does kind of border on glamorization, but by the end, it does really show just what sorts of trauma that the war can do to a person. It really does take that very seriously, which I admire. I didn't expect this movie to be quite that serious when it comes to the war stuff. But anyway, I don't want to get into spoilers, but I will say that you can probably tell what some of these characters are going to end up basically as soon as you first see them, because like I said, this is a very early war movie. This is where lots of the war movie cliches came from, or were decided to embrace some of the war movie cliches or war story cliches that already existed at the time. And one more thing, this is the movie that actually made Gary Cooper a star. Gary Cooper has one scene in this movie. It's just about a 5-minute long scene where he plays a guy who's living in the same tent as Jack and Daniel, and he really does just dominate the scene. He really does do a great job there, and it's not tough to imagine why he became such a big star after this movie. Even though it is one scene, you will notice him. He has this just great star presence there, just great powerful presence there. And once again, even though he was more or less unknown before this, even though this is a silent movie, he really does just dominate that scene. So anyway, I do recommend Wings. Wings is a very good movie with some spectacular war footage. I mean, it is pretty cheesy at times, especially in the very last part of the movie, and the cliches abound. But it has some fantastic war footage. The performances by Charles Rogers and Richard Arlen are very good, and they help carry the movie through the more silly and some of the more uneven and poorly paced sequences. So yeah, I say Wings is a very good movie. You should check it out if you like war movies. If you're interested in the Oscars, it's a very good movie to see.